I'm not sure how to intro this one, but while I had really hoped to catch it in the theaters, I have now finally seen Nosferatu. This is the first Robert Eggers movie I have seen. I've been meaning to see some of his stuff for a while. I've been meaning to watch The Vivitch. I've been meaning to see The Northman. I'm not sure I'm going to say I've been meaning to see The Lighthouse. I'm sure it's good. Not sure I've been in a headspace where I want to deal with that one. But I haven't seen his stuff. This is the first of his movies that I'm taking a look at. And I'm kind of glad I started here because given my familiarity with the story, which, like, if you weren't aware, even if you haven't seen the original silent film Nosferatu or any of the remakes prior to this, it's just Dracula. It's just Dracula with different names for characters. Like that's it. That's all this is. So being familiar with the story, I think, gave me the ability to really appreciate and drink in what Eggers does in terms of atmosphere and visual composition and mood. Because this is a heavy atmosphere and mood piece. And it's also it is deliberately paced without feeling slow. I'll actually make a comparison to The Shining, because y'all know I hate The Shining. And one of my many complaints about The Shining is not just that it's too long or too slow, but there are scenes that feel like they go on forever because they make their point. You know what the scene is. You know everything that you are going to learn from this scene. There's nowhere else for it to go, but it just keeps going. Like, the feeling I get repeatedly in The Shining during scenes is, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it. My quintessential example of that is when Wendy finds the sabotage snowcat, meaning that she and Danny can't leave the hotel because Jack destroyed their ability to do so. And she walks and finds it, like, picks up a piece of the engine. I'm like, cool, I get it. The scene just keeps going for almost a minute. I'll just slow zoom in on her face while the soundtrack goes crazy and like nothing new is happening. Nothing is happening. Like, I get it. Yeah, I get it. Now, I did a whole video talking about how much I hate The Shining and the reasons why. And there were some people who made the assumption and kind of accused me of just being an impatient millennial who can't take slow pacing. Untrue. I can work with slow pacing. It's stopped dead and not moving I don't deal well with. But I don't mind if you go slowly as long as you're still moving, as long as progress is still happening, as long as I don't feel like you have stopped dead. And this never does. It is deliberately paced, but it is always moving forward. And it's visually gorgeous. Like, at times it really feels like it's in black and white, and then you get a color element that comes into play. It's funny. There's a lot of dead center framing, which it was like 3/4 of the way into the movie before I realized, oh, this movie's doing that a lot, which is weird to me that it took me that long to notice because I freaking hate when Wes Anderson does that nonsense. But the thing is, when Wes Anderson does it, it's a gimmick. It's an affect. He does it because it's the thing he does. Dead center framing. Always. That's not what this feels like. There's a lot of dead center framing, but there's also a relatively decent amount of stuff that isn't that. Because it's not always appropriate. So the movie lets it be something else and not always force it to be that. The way freaking Wes Anderson does. The performances are also really, really good. In particular, I really want to highlight the main woman character in this. The character is Ellen. She had one scene in particular where she it's early too. she's like kind of begging her husband not to take this trip, and she kind of has this breakdown, and it's this long continuous shot, and she has to go through emotional hell in an unbroken take as she explains her dreams, what they meant to her. You watch her break down. I'm like, oh my God, this is one take. Holy crap. She's real good. Everybody's good in this. All the actors are quite good in this, in all the parts. But let's talk a little bit about Orlock, our vampire. Bill Skarsgård, which I won't lie, I was a little bit, really? Because it kind of feels like he's just becoming a go-to monster actor. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for go-to monster actors. I love me some Doug Jones, amongst others. But the thing is, I didn't like it that much. And I wasn't that impressed by his Pennywise. So the idea of like, oh, the guy who was Pennywise the clown, now he's going to be this, gross looking vampire thing. I'm like, okay, sure, this might as well happen. First of all, completely unrecognizable. Second of all, this is a very different energy that he brings to this. There's a really well planned, like, amongst other things, I've already talked, it's visually gorgeous. The sound editing and the soundscape of this is also masterfully done. There's a recurring thing where Orlock himself draws these very slow breaths, these breaths, and he does that throughout the whole movie. And that's one of the ways in which, like, it makes him talking take longer, but it feels justified because it feels like it's hard for him to do. And they'll even use that kind of breathing as a signifier for, like, the impact he's having on Ellen at some points. But there was one moment. All right, first of all, I recommend this movie. If you like vampires, if you like Nosferatu, if you like horror, if you like arty horror, artsy fartsy horror especially, if you haven't seen this, go watch it. I'm just going to start talking about the whole thing, mostly gushing. I have one criticism, really, but mostly gushing. I think it's great, and I don't care if I spoil stuff. Again, like, it's mostly just Dracula, so I'm not sure how much there is to be able to spoil. But anyways, there was a shot. So Ellen's husband, I don't remember a lot of these characters' names because I remember their Dracula equivalent names. So, Jonathan Harker is who he would have been in Dracula. That character, who goes to the castle, like to sort out the real estate or whatever, that's going to bring Orlock to civilization and wreak havoc. He's there, and there's one shot of him on the floor, like on this bare stone floor, lying on his back, and Orlock is feeding off of him. Not his neck, his chest. And the shot is a little bit of a distance away, and it's horizontal across the frame. Orlock's naked. That's not what really got me about this. What got me is the gulping sounds, the sucking and gulping sounds were so, I want to say loud, but it wasn't just loud. It was reverberating. And I don't just mean as a sound effect. I mean through Orlock, like his whole body, his head's here and his back end's here. His whole body, like, it's like you could see the swallow work its way through his whole body. And it was slow and deliberate and really unsettling in the best way. I dig that. And also, like, honestly, props to this movie for taking what is notoriously and infamously the template for an ugly vampire and making it horny as hell. I don't want to go so far as to say Orlock is sexy, although, look, if that's your thing, I ain't gonna kink shame you. But, like, I'm not going to say that, but, like, there is a horny energy about this that feels appropriate, feels earned, despite the fact that he doesn't look good, at least not to me, but I still felt that energy, and it still worked. Let me get to my one major criticism, but then I want to end on a positive note. So, if you've seen the movie, there's one thing that you might, if you know me, guess what it's going to be. That is the death of the two young girls. These are the daughters of the friends of Ellen and her husband. These two twin girls. I have a thing about what I tend to call needless cruelty. And one of the things I very strongly associate that is the unnecessary death of children. I emphasize unnecessary. I emphasize that because there are times where it is warranted within a narrative to do that. And I fully admit that part of my sensitivity to this is by the fact that I am a parent. Like, I know that's why, but as I've said many a time, I can only speak with the perspective I have, and it makes me unhappy, and I feel unpleasant to a degree that it takes me out of the movie. So, like, I mentioned being unsettled by like that gulping. That's an unsettled that pulls me in. But when you kill off children for reasons that do not seem adequate in my mind, that doesn't unsettle me in a way that pulls me in. That pulls me right out. I detach. And again, it's not that you can't ever have child death. The single most disturbing scene I think I've ever seen in a film is from the movie Under the Skin. And it involves a young kid. If you've seen the movie, if you know, you know. And I would not call that unnecessary. That shook me to my core, and it should be there. This doesn't shake me. This makes me go, why'd you have to do that? Because I don't know why. Like, here's the thing. I understand that the loss of his entire family is going to make the father figure, the only one who's left, at least for a little while, lose his mind for all intents and purposes. I don't think you needed to kill two young kids to do it. I don't. And I'm not saying like they should have lived. They serve no purpose. That's another part of the problem with them here. They are not characters. They have no purpose here other than to die. They are really the only prop characters in the entire damn movie. And I would say they just shouldn't be there at all. I think that the actors are good enough that they could have sold, because it's Aaron Taylor Johnson playing this guy. He is good enough in this part that I think he could sell the breakdown that he has based off just the idea that his wife, his pregnant wife, is gone. I think that would be enough. I think he could have sold into that. Hell, the movie itself, it tries early on to be like, have him say, my daughters are the most important thing to the world to me. But when both they and his wife all die, he goes to the mausoleum. Yeah, he puts his hands on the kid's coffin, but then walks past them to his wife's coffin, and that's where the meaningful stuff happens. Even the movie doesn't regard them as important. Take the kids out of the movie. Having them die pulled me right out of it. I didn't want to see it. It didn't help. It wasn't horrifying. There is stuff that is horrifying and it is terrifying. That wasn't it. That felt cheap. And this movie's better than that. Okay, I said I wanted to end on something positive. I think that this does about the best job you could do at giving the main woman character in it, Ellen again, who is the Mina Harker, again, if you only know Dracula, giving her as much agency and meaningful choice to make as possible without changing what her role in the story is. Because what happens with Mina in Dracula is a little bit different from what happens to Ellen in Nosferatu. And they do retain what has always happened. In so far as I'm aware, every version of Nosferatu, this character meets the same end. And they keep it, but they grant her as much agency and also just characterization as I think you could ever really do while still keeping the plot the same. It's pretty impressive because this is a character who has a tendency to just be the pretty girl and not much else. The script the direction and absolutely the acting puts a lot of work into her, and it pays off really well. And it makes an ending that under other circumstances might be a little sad or maybe even feel kind of wasteful, feel cathartic. Her dying at the end, I told you I was going to talk spoilers, her dying at the end by sacrificing her life to keep Orlock in place long enough for the sun to come up and kill him. That doesn't feel like a decision thrust upon her or that she wasn't aware of the consequences of. Like, she is given as much power as she could possibly have given that scenario and setup. And I really liked that. So I have my one issue with it, but that really was my one and only issue. This is otherwise an almost unimpeachable horror movie. This is fantastic. Nosferatu. Did you see it? What'd you think about it? I hope you saw it if you got to the end, because like I said, I talked spoilers. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. They all help me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Goddess Elida, Zubin Lafula, Jen, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Andre, Becky Sparks, Claire Wright, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Toku Blahuvian, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Pal Barabajagal, Mary Mello, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. If you want to help me ensure that I can keep these guys fed, as well as the other animals and strange creatures that sometimes occupy my house, check out the rewards on the Patreon. Yeah, hello to you too. Bless you.